Welcome to the Better Than Rich Show with your hosts, Andrew Biggs and Mike Abramowitz. The Better Than Rich Show helps ambitious leaders who are on a mission to leave the world better than they found it, change their perspective on what's important, increase their income and impact, and systemize their life and business. If you've ever struggled with finding your purpose, have felt disconnected or distracted, or found yourself going through the motions, this show will remind you that what you do matters and will re-inspire you to chase your highest dreams. It's time for you to become better than rich.
Hello and welcome to the Better Than Rich Show. I'm your host, Andrew Biggs, and I'm here with my co-host, Mike Abramowitz. So excited to dive in with you all here today on our topic, uncovering and overcoming limiting beliefs. Mike, how you doing today?
Feeling good. We had our event this past weekend. Feeling great.
Awesome. Yeah, and for those of you who are followers of our show on Facebook, you're seeing kind of the activity from this past event. We had 20 outstanding attendees come out. We had an incredible experience. Everyone's kind of ranting and raving about their experience. So if you are joining the conversation on Facebook, keep that going. If you haven't checked us out yet, make sure you do check us out at facebook.com/BetterThanRichShow and just find out more about that there. It's also kind of an exclusive group where you can watch this podcast stream live on Facebook. So you kind of get early access. We can actually answer your comments live. So we are encouraging you to make sure you do that. Also, Mike, I know you have a little bit of podcast housekeeping and updates for us here to kick off the show before we dive into today's topic. Why don't you take that away?
Yeah, it's fun to celebrate some small wins, especially those of you that have been following the show since we launched it. So we just had our 1,000th play. So we have over 1,000 people who've listened to the show at one point in time. Maybe it's not 1,000 different people. And I also don't think it's one person listening 1,000 times. So it's somewhere in between those two metrics. So that's cool. We also had our, we just hit 20 5-star ratings on Spotify and Apple. And we haven't read any of the reviews. And I thought it'd be really cool, if it's okay with you, if I read one of our newest reviews on Apple. Would that be okay?
Let's hear it, man. We'd love it.
So this is from Space Jockey 107. So I don't know who Space Jockey is, but we appreciate the review. And Space Jockey's heading is massive value, ! With a fire emoji. And he or she, I don't know, but Space Jockey says, quickly actionable business tactics for entrepreneurs and business owners of all levels. Mike and Andrew originated from the same sales business that I am currently in. While the two are fantastic salesmen, they're even better businessmen. Andrew has one of the most creative minds I've encountered. Mike may be the most astute professional I've ever met. Both are consequently powerful coaches and excellent teachers. Would recommend to any 1099 entrepreneur, coach, or business owner. So thank you, Space Jockey 107. I don't know who you are, but we appreciate the review, and we're excited to continue adding some more value today with today's episode.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Space Jockey. You know who you are. And also, if you're listening to this and you haven't given us a 5-star review or any review of any kind, please do. We would really appreciate it. Like and subscribe, and make sure that you're sharing this as well. You know, if you get any value from this, the one ask that I have is that you share it with others. So anyways, today's topic is all about uncovering and overcoming limiting beliefs. And I just think it's a fascinating topic because so often what's holding us back isn't the how, right? Sometimes it is, right? We need to examine when the how, like the business strategies, is actually our biggest barrier to achieving what we want. But so often it's actually not the how. It actually originates much sooner in the process. And I think that oftentimes has to do with how our psyche is built around how we view ourselves and how we view others. And limiting beliefs is really at the core of that. So, Mike, talk to us a little bit. What's the value in understanding where your limiting beliefs are, and kind of get started when you think about this topic? What comes up for you?
Well, there's many different voices that we have in our head, and I know it sounds weird to lead in with that, but we have different voices. And when you start to understand the conversation that you're having with yourself, you could start understanding the different voices. And if you don't know what I mean by that, there's a voice that typically will try to protect you. There's a voice that will, when I say protect you, meaning to protect your ego sometimes, or actually protect you from danger. So those are two different voices in a lot of cases. protection of the ego is the one that's like, screw them, right? Like, I'm right, they're wrong. Like, that's the protecting the ego voice. And then there's the voice that actually tries to protect you from danger, which is the voice of, maybe you shouldn't do that because it's dangerous, or you might get hurt, or you might get injured, or you fill in the blank, right? So there's that protection voice. That voice is very prominent because of the way we're wired. So if you really break it down to understand like how we survived as a human species, these voices were to trigger flight, fight, or freeze to protect us as a species. So it's not even your voice. It's like your brain is this computer program that has been wired from the time we, became a species millions and millions of years ago. So those voices are the same voices. You have them, I have them, we all have them. Then that brings up the question is, well, if that is the voice of that we're programmed with, then there's also another voice that we can reprogram and bring in a little bit more truth. Meaning, you have someone cut you off, and they're having immense like they're in a rush and they cut you off in traffic, and you get triggered and you're like, jerk, maybe give them a finger of choice or something, right? um that is a trigger because of your road rage that is triggered inside of you. You are pre-wired to have that. So the truth would be, maybe no, they're in a rush. And maybe there's a little curiosity like, I wonder why they're in a rush. I'm not in a rush. I feel very calm right now, right? Like, it sounds weird, but like when you could have a drop down menu of understanding the voices, then you could start questioning what is the beliefs behind those voices. And when you start getting even more interested and curious around that, then it starts uncovering even more of what is the belief systems that are buried underneath in this unconscious mind. So that's a weird way to start this conversation, but that's what immediately comes to my mind when I think about belief system, is trying to hear the voices and then questioning those voices and what are those beliefs behind those voices that we have in our head. So very interesting, but that's where I first initially go.
Right, absolutely. And it's like, as a starting point for everyone listening, can we just start to pay attention more? I definitely think self-awareness is it's kind of the precursor to all growth, right? So we have to accept something before we can actually grow through it. And the question is, are we listening even to the voices in our head? Are we listening to the conversation going on in our head? And this is why, I recommend practices like stillness or meditation, so we can actually just start to pay attention. What's actually going on in my mind? And so often what's driving us really isn't the best version of us. It's kind of like a smaller version, or a version of us that is limited in many ways, right? And so what I'm kind of hearing you say, the way you look at it, is there's all these different voices. And then there's kind of like this overarching voice that maybe is like the most mature version of us. And it's like, can that overarching version kind of take a step back from all the individual voices and actually kind of make edits, make changes, make upgrades? If you're listening and maybe you've ever had a moment where you observed your thoughts, that's a really good, important starting place. As a starting point, it's just like recognizing that you can see your thoughts, so therefore you must not be your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. You are not the voices in your head. If you're observing them, then obviously you're not them. You're something else. So understanding that is super important. So then what is that something else? It's some sort of like baseline of consciousness that's able to observe all the activities and actions that are going on inside your head. And if we can start to get more familiar with that version of ourselves, this like, emptiness, this empty consciousness, this empty space that can observe things, then we're starting to be able to observe, okay, well, wow, where did I pick up this limiting belief that I'm not good enough to be successful? Or where did I pick up this limiting beliefs that, I'm just not talented in this area or that? And we can start to uncover what are the voices that are serving us and what are the voices that aren't. But we can only do that by first getting some self-awareness. What's coming up for you, Mike?
Yeah, and I love the question of where did this limiting belief come from, right? So that question of where did this story, and you could also say limiting belief and you could change it up with a story, like where did this story come from? And it's a very small story, but I'll give you an example of this. I went through a lot of deep work during the last decade and a half of questioning and learning about me and why I do certain things. And one of the questions and curiosities that I had was about trust. Like, where, not that I had trust issues, but it was like there was this curiosity. It's like, do I trust them? I don't know. So I went through a whole exercise and meditation of like my earliest memory with trust. And some of you may have heard this story, maybe not. I don't think I shared it on the show, but when my sister and I, we were real young. I mean, I must have been 5, she was 7, maybe even younger. But my sister and I were driving up to Boston from New Jersey to go see my oldest brother perform in a play. And we were young. We were in the back seat. My parents decided to rent a car, and in the car that they rented, you could pull down the back seat. You could pull it down and go into the trunk. So when my sister and I were in the back seat, we're just kind of like teasing one another, whatever. And she pulled the latch, and the seats folded down, so we could actually go into the trunk while my parents were driving. So my parents were in the front seat. They're, my mom was driving, my dad was in the passenger seat, or vice versa, and they were in the front. And then my sister and I were in the back, and Liz, my sister, was like, I'm going to go into the back. When I get in there, shut it. When I bang, open it back up. So she goes in, I shut it. She's in the trunk of the car now. And maybe 30 seconds, she bangs. I open it. I let her out. And she was like, Michael, that was so cool. You try. So 5-year-old Mike is like, okay, sounds really cool. So I get there, I crawl in, I go into the trunk. My parents are oblivious of what's going on. I'm in the trunk. 30 seconds approximately go by. I bang and nothing happens. Another 10 seconds, 5 seconds. I bang. I'm banging. I'm banging. I'm banging. What felt like an eternity, what felt like probably, was a lifetime of minutes. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was trapped. I didn't know what happened. She finally opens it up, which was probably maybe like 30 seconds past. She opens it up, and I'm like hysterically crying. I can't breathe. I can't catch my breath. I thought I was suffocating, and she's hysterically laughing, thought it was the funniest thing. She's 7 years old. My parents have no idea what's going on, but there was probably hundreds and thousands of moments that happened when I was 5 years old. But for some reason, at 36 years old, I remember that experience 30 years ago. So if you have a memory from 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that means there's some sort of story, and you could change the word story, limiting belief, trauma. You could exchange whatever you want, whatever you want to describe it. But it was an isolated moment that I've held on to for decades because of the feeling that was trapped inside of my body that was aligned with that situation when I was a kid. So a lot of our stories and a lot of our traumas, a lot of our belief systems come from our childhood. And if we could really be willing to poke around and have that conversation with our childhood self, we can uncover that that's actually not the truth. That's a scared child. That mature voice that you just said, Andrew, that mature voice can come in and say, that's not real. That was just one isolated instance. That's not everyone. That was a 7-year-old girl who was trying to have fun and thought it was funny, that wasn't seeing it from your lens. And like reworking some of that was really important for my life. And that's one of many memories. But that was that's what came up for me when I hear this idea of where did we pick up our limiting beliefs. And a lot of times, if we look back at our childhood and the timeline of our life, it's probably picked up somewhere along the line.
Absolutely. I mean, I think first off, thanks for sharing that story. And the reality is where did beliefs come from, right? Where did you get these certain beliefs, particularly beliefs about yourself? Here's some categories maybe of different things you might want to consider examining. One is like beliefs about yourself. The other is like beliefs around others. Another would be beliefs about how things work out, right? Who's ever said shit happens, right? And it's like, okay, is that the most empowering story? I mean, I remember hearing my dad say that all the time growing up, shit happens, right? And it's like, well, that's one way of looking at it. That's true. But also, what if we had, a more empowering story, a more positive spin on things? So what are your beliefs about circumstances and, things working out for you? What are your beliefs about money? What are your beliefs about your finances? What are your beliefs about your career, about your company, about your boss? So there's just so many different things you can start to uncover. And what the clue that Mike gave there is he remembered something from the past. And so one of the things I'll just share with you, this is kind of the psychological factors that I've studied quite a bit. But if you have a memory that's older than 18 months old, 18 months ago. And it's still kind of nagging at you, and like when you think about it, it kind of like produces a similar experience, like a traumatic uprising or a trigger for you. If you had an experience that you've held on to and it's older than 18 months, you still haven't integrated those lessons that it's trying to teach you. Like that's why the memory has been conserved, is because you still haven't fully integrated the lessons. Because if you had, then you could kind of let it go. And so Mike is remembering back to his childhood when he was 5 and recognizing, oh, I haven't actually integrated those lessons. Let me figure them out and learn them properly. I also, as you were kind of chiming in with your personal story, I put down the word interpretation. And when we are actually experiencing events, we're experiencing them at a certain maturity level that we're at. And here, so much of our foundation is actually kind of fixed very early on in our childhoods. I was talking with someone the other day, and they said, basically your subconscious is being formed in your first 7 years, which is kind of crazy to think about. My son's 7 years old. And so what has he picked up that's really been great for him? What has he picked up that's maybe not? And I'm sure it'll be very interesting as a coach to like have a little human that I'm working with on a regular basis to try to uncover where he's picking up things. And it'll be a very fascinating sort of case study for me, obviously, as I look to serve him. But that, we're picking these things up very early on, but we don't have the maturity of understanding how the world works, of understanding different competing forces of why certain things might happen. And so we may well interpret something that isn't true, but because in our 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old minds, or 10-year-olds or 12-year-olds, or however old you were when you experienced something, we didn't have the maturity to like actually properly understand the full context of the situation. So we settle for something that's much simpler that actually is inaccurate. A classic example is parents are getting a divorce. You're 5 years old, you're 7 years old. And of course, what does the kid think? Must be because of me, right? And it's like, who knows what's going on in that marriage, inside that relationship? But oftentimes the child can't disconnect their own involvement from that. Or mom and dad don't love me the same or whatever. I was just having a conversation with my son this morning. He's at home on spring break, and normally he's at school right now. He doesn't like the fact that daddy's working. And he's like, you don't want to spend time with me? You don't want to play with me? I'm like, bro, I got a podcast scheduled. My audience is waiting. Mike is waiting for me. We got to get to work. And, of course, his interpretation is different. So I have to work with him on that. But it's just an interesting concept of like, how did you interpret things? And if you have a memory that's older than 18 months, let's go back and examine it. What lessons do you need to integrate? So, Mike, what's coming up for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I have not heard that before with the lessons from 18 months. Like if you have heard something, if you remember something or something that's still stuck for a year and a half, it's like, well, if it's still there and I'm still feeling the tightness in my body, then I really haven't extracted the lesson from it. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. I wrote that one down. I really like that. And, we obviously can refer back to like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but just 18 months ago, like, cool. If I'm still feeling and holding on to that, I think specifically like animosity in a relationship, it's like, sure. if I have expectations of someone and they don't meet my expectations of them, then there potentially could be resentment. So if that resentment is still there for 18 months and I haven't moved past it, it's like, okay, then I probably could practice a little bit more empathy and understanding what was their worldview. Kind of like what you said, what are their beliefs about themselves, about others, about the world? I specifically like what you said about around money, because I started thinking back. I was like, I remember growing up, I saw my mom was at home. She had 6 kids. My dad would work 6 days a week, and he would drive an hour back and forth as a plumber. He owns his own plumbing business to this day. He'll be 81 and still works 6 days a week. It's crazy. And I still remember, every single Friday, he would give my mom $600. $600 on the table. And, that was the payment to my mom for her to pay all the bills. And if he was ever short or like didn't have enough, or if she needed more, it was always the story that I interpreted growing up in that household was money is hard to come by. That was the story that I saw. It's like, oh, come on, I had to pay the workers, or jobs didn't come through, or for my mom was like, I need more. The kids have this, and I'm like, so my interpretation as a kid, money's hard to come by, and that story really carried through for probably through my 20s and even into my early 30s until when I really started really questioning that. It's like, is money hard to come by? It's
Mm.
like there's so much money in the world, and the idea that it just exchanges hands, it's like there's maybe right now like they're printing more money, so I guess there's more money to come by, but the idea that it's just money is all around me. Money is all around me, and if I could add enough value to the marketplace, people will want to pay me some of that money. And it's just like money is actually easy to come by as long as I add value to the marketplace and solve problems. If I could solve problems and add value, money is easy to come by. Money will flow to me in abundance if I can add value and solve problems in the marketplace. And that narrative of that story, I realized that is the truth. Even my dad fixes a job. He does a plumbing job and he gets paid. Like he solves their problem, adds value to the marketplace. He makes money. And it's like the more he does that, the more money he makes. So money is actually pretty easy to come by as long as he can continue to add value to marketplace and solve people's problems. Like money is pretty easy to come by. But when I was 9 years old, money looked like it was really, really hard to come by. So I really appreciated, that idea that you brought up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is we're hitting on it spot on, and everyone listening hopefully is viscerally experiencing the difference in the vibrational frequencies and how we actually feel those two belief systems differently in our bodies and in our minds, and which is producing more energy. Money is hard to come by, or money is all around me and it's easy to come by as long as I add value. It's like, how are you going to feel on a daily basis swapping those two beliefs out? And that's the invitation to everyone watching. It's to actually take the time to examine what are my limiting beliefs that are no longer serving me, and how do I replace them with better beliefs. One thing you might consider is an exercise where I just call it the I am exercise, where you just write out I am and then ... And all we're going to do is just finish that sentence. And again, if you're playing along at home, hopefully you'll pull out your notes app or pull out a notebook. If you want to do this exercise later, you absolutely can. But just write I am ... and just start writing. And it's very much like a free association. If it pops in your head, just write it down. I am handsome. I am talented. I am smart. I am creative. I am disorganized. I am inconsistent. I am, weak-willed at times. Whatever it is that comes up for you. Okay, write those things down. All right, let's keep the I ams that are working and serving you. But oh my gosh, why did I write I am, unreliable down? And is that actually true? Let me circle that one and examine what are some times in my past where I have been reliable. Right? And can we at least bring a more nuanced belief into that? And if it popped up and you wrote it down, then somewhere in your unconscious mind, you believe it, is the way you want to look at that. All right, well, let's examine that one. I'm unreliable. Okay, what's a better and more empowering story, right? When I'm fully dedicated to my work, I'm super reliable, right? When I am super clear on my vision, I always follow through. Okay. Right? Do I always follow through? No, but when I am super clear on my vision, I do always follow through. When I'm energized, I follow through. I am reliable. So you don't even have to lie to yourself. It's not about looking in the mirror, because some of this might sound kind of like hooey-fooey, new age bullshit, where it's like you stare in the mirror and you tell yourself 10 times, I am reliable, I am reliable, I am reliable. You don't have to lie to yourself, but how do you come up with a more nuanced version of a belief that's no longer serving you? Mike, what's coming up for you?
Yeah. And I like that. It's like you're giving yourself evidence. So you're drawing evidence from the past to validate your I am statement. So it's I am reliable when I am tied to my vision, right? So it's like you're adding evidence. So, and you could even say it's when I'm tied to my vision, just like, and then draw evidence from your past. So the more you can draw evidence from your past, the more you're anchoring to your subconscious that it is the truth, because you don't want to be incongruent where it's like, yeah, right. Kind of like the old adage. It's like, um, you know, I don't want weeds. I don't want weeds. I don't want weeds. I don't want weeds. And you say that to your garden, and it's like, well, just saying that to the garden doesn't do anything. Like, you actually got to tend to the garden. You got to water the plants. You got to pull out the
Sure.
weeds, right? You can't just yell at the weeds and say, I don't want you anymore. You actually got to tend to the garden, and we have to sometimes tend to the garden of our mind. And one of the
Mm,
things you triggered to me is using a lot of those global or universal language words, like the words like everyone, everyone,
sure.
always,
Sure.
never. Any of those global beliefs, those are global words or universals. Like, everyone is, always doing blank. I never do that, or you never do that. Anytime you say stuff like that, you're already setting yourself up for some sort of belief system that's really not true. It's just not
Mm,
true, because there's always going to be exceptions to that rule. And one of the things that I wrote down as you were talking is if you could just be aware of the language that you're speaking, the language will oftentimes trigger the belief. So if you use words like need, like, I really need more time. Well, that's coming from a place of scarcity. So need is triggering an emotion or triggering a belief. So oh, he never, she never. It's, again, that's triggering certain emotions and triggering certain beliefs. Also, your focus, where your thoughts go. It's like, if you're going into your day, or if you're going into a business meeting, it's like, oh, man, they're probably going to say no. Like, the focus paired up with the language of the thought is they're probably going to say no. And then the words are like, yeah, they're probably going to say no. And then the mind and the mouth are starting to have this conversation with another. Well, you're already really creating momentum towards a belief. And then you match that up
mm,
with your posture. And if you bring your posture and your body and you start breathing real fast and maybe like breathing real fast and hyperventilating a little bit, and then your body starts shifting down towards the ground a little bit, and your shoulders start drooping down a little bit. Now, if your body's bringing energy down, your focus is going towards something, and then your words are speaking about this uncertainty. Yeah, that's probably going to create a certain belief, an emotion such as angst, worry, depression, overwhelm. It's probably going to be in somewhere in that language.
right.
So there are tools to help you self correct. And I recently had a conversation with someone I'm coaching, and the conversation was, he said something like, every time I'm by myself, every time I'm alone, I start having these thoughts of like, why am I even here? And
Mm,
even contemplating taking his life. And he started using some of these words of always, and no one, and things like
mm,
that. And I said, well, do you feel like that when you're at your eighth rep on the second set at the gym? So when you're on your eighth rep on your second set at the gym, is that the what's going through your mind? What's going through your mind? Like, well, get to number 10, get to number 9, get to number
mhm,
12. It's like, cool. So you don't always have these thoughts in your mind, huh? It's only when you're sitting by yourself in your couch and no one else is around. It's like, okay. So it's not always. There is evidence that it's not all the time. That's number one. Number two, well, what's your relationship with yourself? What's your relationship with being alone? What's your relationship with
mhm,
loneliness? Right. And then we could explore that a little bit more. So therefore, we're working through a belief system on being alone. Where's the belief about loneliness? Well, let's go back. Where does it come? And abandonment, or whatever it might be. But by being questioned, by being curious and questioning these things, that's why this is the Better Than Rich show. It's because oftentimes people have an abundance of wealth. Great. They have all this money, they have all this time. But if they're all effed up by themselves and hate spending time by themselves, what's the point of having so much time and so much money if they have no one to spend it on or spend it with, and they hate being by themselves? It's like, well, I don't know if that's rich, you know?
mm, mhm,
So this isn't the, Better Than Money podcast for that reason. It's not just about money. It's not just about time. It's also about what's your relationship with yourself. And do you love yourself when no one
mm.
else is around is really a good question to start thinking about and questioning. And if you have curiosities of like, yeah, I kind of don't like being by myself in this example, well, you probably should make your way to the betterthanrich.com website and set up a discovery call with Andrew or I so we could poke around some of those belief systems with you. We'll do it for free, 45 minutes at least, and just poke around with you and help you out, because someone did that for me. And that's why I would love to do that with you. And I know Andrew is one of those someone. So
absolutely. We're always available anytime to jump on calls with y'all. And I mean, if you talk to anybody who was at this past event or has worked with us in an intimate way, they know like there's so much value here. If you'd only be so bold as to step forward. So, I really love what you're sharing there. And it's like looking for evidence for building up a case, right? We're kind of building a case. And, also there's like this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It's like, oh, they're probably not going to buy, right? Things never work out for me. Like we're coupling these beliefs together. And then it's like, we show up and then guess what we're going to start to look for in our interactions with this, potential sale. It's like, we're looking for clues that they're not going to buy, right? Instead of looking for clues that they are going to buy. And looking for all the ways that things are working out for you and in your favor. So where our attention goes, energy flows, is where our focus goes. We typically are going to end up in that spot. And, this isn't like, just that new age stuff like Rhonda Byrne, secret stuff, but there's definitely something to, making sure our attention is placed in the right spot, in a place that's actually going to serve us.
And Andrew, I know you already gave one tool with the I am statements. I'd be curious if you had a few other tools that maybe can help someone. So if someone's listening, they're like, this sounds good. I bought into the philosophy. Yeah, I kind of have these, some of these belief systems I could work on. I like this I am statements idea. What are there maybe a couple other tools? You already mentioned stillness, like practicing some stillness with the mind. You also mentioned the I am statements. Anything else that kind of shows up that's like, these are some tools that you could kind of bring out if you need them. Absolutely.
Well, what I would do is I would actually take the I am statements and let's apply that to other areas as well. So, I wrote down money is ... Life is ... Others are ... My job is ... So this is a way of like kind of like taking what's in the unconscious and like getting it on paper. If you're willing to kind of like play along and just write down whatever pops in your mind, what we're doing is we're basically bringing the unconscious to the conscious mind, and then we can actually examine, holy shit, this is like, why do I believe that? Is this really true? And no matter what, again, we can pretty much find evidence to support any case we want to make. If you're really committed to holding on to your limiting beliefs, fellow traveler on the road right now, or wherever you're at listening to this, if you're really committed to holding on to your limiting beliefs, there's really, nothing we can do to convince you. And you might have to say, I have all this evidence in the world that that this belief is true and there's nothing that can change it. And what's interesting is that actually might be true, but you're just looking at one set of facts. And if we were to look at a very different set of facts, maybe we'd actually change that belief. And that's also, that brings up a little side note of just oftentimes that's actually what's happening in our world today, and why people are so all over the place is that, people are just looking at different sets of facts. It's a very interesting concept, but yeah.
Yeah. And that's goes back to one of our other former episodes, like episode, 2 or 3 or 4 about like, social media and, just navigating through what's being fed to you, because it's like, if you're constantly hearing the same thing over and over again, fear, be scared of this, be fearful of these types of people, be fearful of this circumstance, right? If that's all that's being fed to your mind, of course it's going to create a belief. It's like, what is a belief? A belief, ready? Let's break this down. A belief is a story that we tell ourselves with absolute certainty. Say it again. What is a belief? A belief is a story that we tell ourselves with absolute certainty. That's all it is. So if we are saying a story over and over and over again with absolute certainty that it's the truth, then that's a belief. So if you have beliefs that serve you, great, keep them up. If you have beliefs that might not serve you, great, switch them up.
Totally. And I kind of look at it as like, I use an operating system or like a coding analogy. If we think about like an operating system and how it works, we have certain things and it's all coded out. And then every so often, guess what pops up into your little window? And I updated my Chrome here today, but it's like, hey, new updates are available. Would you like to upgrade them? And depending on how you're feeling that day or how busy you are, you're like, yes, no, or whatever. With our limiting beliefs, it's our operating system. Our belief system is like the code that's coding how we act in the world. Just like an operating system is the code that's figuring out how your OS works, how you actually use a certain software or hardware. So the belief system is the operating system of your body. The body's the hardware. The belief system is your OS, right? And then the individual thoughts are like different apps. Like, what's my money app look like? What's my sales app look like? My marketing app or whatever. And so we have certain beliefs, and we have to go in, examine the code, and find the bugs, right? So we have to debug the code and be like, okay, this limiting belief right here, this little strip of code, it sucks. Let's get rid of it and let's replace it with this code. Copy, paste. We've now made it way better. And now everything, right, on this operating system is going to operate better because, the OS that's underlying it is better. And so we need to be like those debuggers, if you follow the analogy, but like, how do we actually upgrade our internal operating system? And that's a large part of what we actually do, is to go in that internally and find out what are the limiting beliefs that are no longer serving you, and let's show them the door, right? And let's build the evidence and find the evidence that you need to upgrade them.
And that's why it's such a powerful activity to write it down, because then it's documented. Because we have 50,000 thoughts that go through our mind every day, and 97% of those thoughts are about the past.
Right.
So if you do the math on that, we're only really working with 3% of 50,000 thoughts that come into our minds. So we want to feed those 3%. And also from the 97% of the past, we want to find the past that's giving us evidence towards ideas that serve us and move us closer to the life that we desire, versus move us closer to the fear that's being presented to us all around us. So, and that's why circle of influence and the people surrounding yourself is so important. I was just having a conversation with someone on my staff, and I said, I love the people that you surround yourself with. I know the people you surround yourself with. They're great people, but you're the leader of that tribe. So that's great. If you're the leader, perfect. So you're surrounding yourself with other people that maybe are a little bit below you or alongside of you, but who are you learning from if I'm not around? Well, that's why we need to surround you around other people. So I'm giving her a budget to go find a life coach that will work with her over the next few months, because she needs to get influenced by someone that's outside of her peer group. Because frankly, you shouldn't be the smartest person in the room. You shouldn't be the leader in every single room that you're in. If that's the case, that's going to create limitations to your belief system. Hence why this conversation is so relevant.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I love that. And giving your people a budget, like, this is a way to think creatively in how to run a business. I think that's really beautiful. Cool. So we're kind of getting near the close of our conversation here, Mike. I'm just curious in general, is there anything else that's coming up for you in terms of uncovering and overcoming limiting beliefs and just the importance, or any other strategies that you want to add?
And I know we'll jam on this on a future episode, but the idea of self-confidence is where it comes from, is holding the agreements that you bring to yourself. So holding the agreement and keeping the agreements you make to yourself. So if you want to continue to work on turning these limiting beliefs into new truths and new strengths, make an agreement and then hold that agreement. Even if it's something small, like the last 30 seconds of my shower, I'm going to turn the knob to cold and I'm going to do it for 30 seconds. And then if it gets to 20 seconds, you're like, this sucks. Doing those last 10 seconds and holding that agreement, as small as that might be. I'm going to drink water before I eat food. I'm going to listen to a podcast and learn before I listen to music and entertain. I'm going to read 5 pages of a book before I turn on Netflix. You just start with these small little, like, tougher decisions, and then continue working on those and continue keeping those agreements that you make to yourself. I think that's a great way to start reworking those belief systems.
Awesome. Well, hey, everyone listening, we really appreciate you coming along for the ride here today. Again, if you do have the time to rate and review, we would really appreciate it. Again, make sure you follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Better Than Rich Show. We can't wait to continue to grow this community. and continue to offer amazing content as well as amazing experiences like the one we just had in Tampa. Have a great day ahead, and remember to leave today better than you found it. We'll see you next week on the Better Than Rich Show. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the show, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram at betterthan_rich and join our Facebook group at the Better Than Rich Show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to seeing you next time. And remember, leave today better than you found it.